Hello and welcome to the Disney Dream Girls podcast, show number 192 for Sunday the 14th of January 2018. Well, this is a very special show for you. Firstly, before I introduce the show, I would like to announce the winner of Who Guessed the Steps at Disneyland competition. And my total was 169,220 steps, which approximately was about 77 miles in the 7 days I was in the theme park. It was really close, but the closest person, my Welsh wonder, Tracy Farley. So Tracy, there will be something Disney in the post to you. Now at the moment I am running another competition. Which Disneyland attraction did I ride the most and how many times? As at recording, nobody's guessed it. Have a go. I've got an awesome gift to send to you. I'll keep the competition running a couple more days. Anyway, today's show is a cracker of the show. I have with me the wonderful, the amazing Terri Hardin, and I'm taking you back, you're all coming with me, to the Disneyland Hotel in California. Terri and I sit down in a quietish corner and chat about how Star Wars changed her life. I never knew this about Terri. Please, I hope you enjoy. I totally can listen to Terri Hardin talk for hours. This isn't hours, it's about 40 minutes. Hope you enjoyed the show. Jane and I will be back with you next week.
Where dreams begin.
Hello and welcome to the Disneyland Hotel. We are sat having just feasted on breakfast in Steakhouse 55. I have with me the wonderful Terri Hardin.
Hi everyone, happy holidays.
It sounds very strange saying happy holidays, knowing that this will go out some point in January.
That's it, but happy holidays still, because don't you want Christmas to last like several months? Especially somebody told me that December was a very struggling month for most of them, including myself, and January proves to be a softer, kinder month. So happy holidays.
Well, there's more of me to be a softer, kinder person after all that squidgy French toast brioche and beignets and all those good stuff that you get to eat over in California.
Yeah, yes. And it's good you celebrated.
Yeah. And we're sort of sequestered upstairs. We've sort of shooed everybody else away who was breakfasting with us because we want to talk a little bit about, I think we're going to go with Star Wars.
Yes, there's a new film out and so many people wanted to know what was it going to be like? Did you like it? And a lot of times, because of my history, and if you don't know my history with Star Wars, I was there for the very first Episode 4 screening back in 1977.
So let's go back then. Let's take time back, all the way back. How old would you have been in 1977?
I think it was about 18, 19 years old. Yeah.
6. Terri
6
was
years
6.
old.
Let's just agree
Driving
that
a
Terri
car.
was 6. He was very tall for your age.
Exactly. And I had a boyfriend at the time. He's actually now my husband. But back then he had a book based on Star Wars, the very first Star Wars. And it had a Ralph McQuarrie, very famous artist, illustration on the front. So I ran out and bought the paperback and I read it cover to cover and I said, could this be it? So for those of you who were around in 77 and you remember what movies were like, there was no science fiction. There was no comic book. There were no superheroes. It was all love stories. And as one person said at breakfast, angst. There was sadness and whatever. But mostly love stories. And honestly, as a young person, I was sick of love stories. I did not like love story. I did not like The Way We Were. I was really hungry for science fiction and fantasy. And all I could watch were old Star Trek reruns. I could watch 2001 A Space Odyssey, but you had to watch it in the daytime because otherwise you fell asleep. It's better than Somanex, this movie. Even though it's a fantastic movie, you will fall asleep. So I was so hungry, as so many were, including George Lucas, to have a movie that was just revolutionized the way movie making is. And I'm saddened because I don't know if any of you will ever, because of social media and the way that we look at films today, will ever have anything that impacted you the way Star Wars impacted me the first time I saw it. So you remember the scene in Jaws where Roy Scheider sees the boy get eaten and the room stretches, the whole chair stretches. That's what happened to me in a theater seat at the Chinese Theater in Hollywood when I first saw Star Wars. And the scene that did it, now, of course, the scene with the princess's ship being chased was amazing. But for me as a young artist who had been building costumes and creating little figures ever since I was about 3 or 4 years old, what happened was for me that everybody told me this was a hobby. And you may have heard this too as artists. This is your hobby. What's your career? This is your hobby. What's your career? And then I watch Star Wars and I see the chess scene on the Millennium Falcon. I see the cantina scene in the first Star Wars film. And I realize that I can do this for a living, that there are people who are creating this on the screen and they're getting paid for it. Back then, no VHS, no DVD, no streaming, no internet, no computers, nothing. So you had what's called a newspaper, and that was possibly a magazine that you could research and comb over and dig in the hopes of seeing and learning more about this amazing film. I was obsessed in doing this, so I began to, the first week I saw it 67 times.
How do you see a film 67 times?
Well, the Chinese theater, like every theater, charged per entry.
Yeah.
So you saw the movie once, they cleared the theater, and then you had to pay for it again. And I'm a young teenager, so I can't possibly afford that. And at the time, I think the ticket price was $6.
Yeah.
So I took wigs, I took different clothes, and I hid into the bathroom, no lie, hid in the bathroom and changed my look, and then waited for the new wave of people to come in, and then I snuck in as a different individual. And back then, they didn't think anyone was that crazy, so they never really checked like they did later on. But this time, and at my 67th viewing, I got caught by the manager. He had looked down from the catwalk and noticed this girl who seemed to be all these different girls, but they carried the same handbag, and I had forgotten to change the handbag. So I was like, So he said, what is so important about this movie? And I had a sketch pad with me, and I showed him my sketches, and then I showed him my notebook that had all the credits written down by hand of people I thought might be influential in making it a career for myself. And then later, I would try to cross-reference them in the newspaper if they were speaking or wherever I might find them. And that's how Star Wars launched me on my art career.
So you saw it the 67th time, then how did you, because you didn't stop at 67.
No, then I went to London. I had planned a trip to London, backpacking through Europe. I wanted to see the Queen's Silver Jubilee for all of you Brits out there. I love the royal family. I love the idea that you have a queen and a prince and dukes and duchesses. I just thought it's just the most magical place was to be able to go to England and see this firsthand. And I backpacked with 3 of my friends. We backpacked all over Europe, and we watched the Silver Jubilee, which was also 77, and it was spectacular. And then I realized and knew that London had not yet seen Star Wars. Star Wars was not going to get to London until October of 77. And so I fell in love with Europe so much and your beautiful country out there that I sent my friends home, and my parents were just insanely scared. So my parents were afraid because they had never seen their 19-year-old daughter, just take off. And they tried to dissuade me from going over and backpacking. But I said, as a young girl, I'm never going to see it if I don't go now, because I could be married. I could have obligations that will prevent me from going. So I'm going to go. And I loved it so much that I went to Paris and I saw people sketching on the streets of Paris, and I decided to sketch on the streets of Paris for change. And then I mimed in Piccadilly Circle so that I could, to get enough money so that I could stay another month. My friends went home and I was on my own. And I'm amazed that I did it. And my parents were like, what do you mean you're not coming home? And they were freaking out. They just did not know it. They tried to tempt me with a car. Please, it's scary. But back then we didn't have a cell phone where they could just call me. We had to use landlines. And the most expensive call my father insisted I make was $1,000 a minute. And it was Austria back in 77. So I go to Foyle's bookstore. I meet a wonderful gentleman there who's helping me with books. I was a big book fan. I still am. Books are going to move me out of my house. But he was so kind and so generous with the kind of books that I wanted that I said, let me give you a tip. Star Wars is coming. Get everything that you possibly can that has to do with Star Wars and you'll make a fortune. And he did. And late October, he sent me a gift saying thank you for that. My friend Rumpf is responsible for the tankards you saw from 1980 that are very expensive now. They're Darth Vader, Chewbacca, and Obi-Wan. Those were all made by my friend, and he sent me a set as a thank you because I had told him that he should do those, and he made quite a bit of money off it. So Star Wars was huge in my life, and I decided to collect. And nowadays with Disney, you have everything from a Post-it note to lightsaber tongs to Death Star barbecue and Star Wars toasters, which to me are ridiculous. I just laugh every time a car takes Star Wars. And now drive the Star Wars Rogue. And you go, you just are looking for the money. Tape Star Wars across it so people will spend the money.
Star Wars cheese strings.
Yeah. It's like, what? I mean, people are so next time I do a sculpture, just know if it's Stitch, it's going to be Star Wars Stitch because, of course, I want more money.
It's going to be Star Wars Groot.
Star Wars Groot. You just kind of...
I am really, Star Wars Groot.
Exactly. I'm sitting to myself thinking, in fact, I have a friend that does pins, and he's a real sweet fellow, but he's just done... He takes characters like, say, from Zootopia and dresses them Star Wars.
I've seen that
and
pin. It's so cute.
And it's really cute and it's really adorable. But guys, come on, So for me, it's a bit of a... I kind of go, really? I don't want to ever feel like the only reason that Star Wars is being shown or represented is because you want to take my money from me in the pockets from the fans. There are a lot of fans. There are a lot of us out there.
So at what point did you start attracting media attention in the number of times you'd seen the movie? Because nowadays, it's not really unheard of fans seeing films 20, 30, 40 plus times. But I would imagine back in the late 70s, a young girl like yourself to have seen the Star Wars films for so many times, quite a bit of a furore going on in the press.
Yeah, because you always had to get out of your chair, get in your car, and go to a movie theater. That was the only way you were going to see a film. There was no way for you to see it in your home unless one of the networks showed it on television, and of course, then it was full of commercials. So to do this, and I eventually saw Star Wars, the episode 4, 181 times.
Wow.
And at that point, Lucasfilm did a book on George Lucas and his life called Skywalking, and I'm on page 3. It talks about Terri having seen the movie that many times on page 3. And George Lucas thought, man, this girl's got to be a nut. I'm sure he was like, what is it she possibly sees? Because back then people were doing costume contests, not cosplay. It was not called cosplay. It was a costume contest. Maybe we just weren't that clever to come up with cosplay, but it was a costume cavalcade, and you would go to conventions very much like you do today, but they were much smaller, and we competed for cash prizes. So it was a way that artists could create things that were interesting. Well, I made the decision at one of these conventions to get the first ticket in Hollywood. I was going to get the first ticket to Empire Strikes Back, the second film that was being released in 1980. And I said to myself, I'm getting it. And somebody else said, no, I'm getting it. And so I got there at 11 o'clock on a Sunday, and I stayed all the way, never went home, stayed all the way in line for 3 days. Now, a guy later stood in line for episodes 1, 2, and 3, Phantom Menace, garbage. And
I think you got a better deal.
I thought he was a turkey, because I said, do you think if I had the internet, I would have stood in line for 3 days? It was the only way I was going to get a ticket was to physically stand in line because there was no other way to get it. And that's what I did. And it wasn't easy. Just to be clear, there was the owner of the Egyptian theater. It was going to be showing there. The owner of the Egyptian theater decided that there was no way he was going to have some kid standing out in front waiting for a movie for 3 days. So he tried to get me arrested. He literally called the police and told them that this kid is loitering. And police came in Hollywood. And I said, I'm not loitering. I'm waiting for a movie ticket. And you should be out catching criminals, not keeping fans from seeing the movie. And with my one phone call, I'm going to call a radio station and I'm going to tell them that. And I'm going to tell him what an idiot this guy is. And the police said, okay, all right, fair enough, kid. But keep walking. So as long as I kept walking and didn't sit or stand, they said, we won't arrest you. But because you're not loitering, you're moving. Crazy, silly. My 100th viewing of the original film, Star Wars film, they did a big press thing at the Chinese theater. And the Chinese theater gave me a poster that had sat out in front of Star Wars, had run there for a year, and they gave me the poster of Leia, Luke, Han, and it wasn't signed by any of them, but it was signed by Anthony Daniels, Kenny Baker, and David Prowse, and I still have it. It's chewed up and faded because it sat out there for a year, but I still have it. And then they also gave me the birthday poster that celebrated 1 year of showing Star Wars at a theater in 1977 to 78. So now I said this perfect companion is to do this ticket from 1980. And so I sat there and walked back and forth, and the manager of the Egyptian came out and he said, until there's a designated line, until there's a rope with a stand that says stand here, you have to keep moving. So I was playing Magenta in the Rocky Horror Picture Show at the Tiffany Theater in Hollywood. And I called the manager of that theater and said, can I borrow your rope and post? I swear, God's truth. And my friend picked it up. We brought it. We clipped it. And I stood there. And he came out and went, where'd that come from? I said, what are you talking about? I thought you put it up here. And he was like, well, now you have to stand. You can't sit. So he kept getting angrier and angrier and angrier. Lord. So it was really a crazy time. I couldn't eat. I fought. I was determined to get this ticket. I met someone who had Star Wars stock in Lucasfilm. He came around. I had been there maybe 10 hours, and he came over and he saw this one girl standing there. And he said, what are you standing here for? And I said, I'm waiting to see Star Wars. And he says, are you kidding me? And I said, no. And he went, oh, and he rubbed his hands as if he was going to make major money, because here was a kid like 2.5 days before the movie standing in line waiting for that first ticket. So ups and downs, without boring you guys, the highlights were that it finally goes dark on the first night. And I had met the Star Wars fan club chairman, Craig Miller, who's still, I think, quite involved with Lucasfilm, but in a more quiet capacity. And he stepped out and saw me finally standing against the wall, very tired. I'm finally now wrapped in a Star Wars blanket. And he said, Terri, what are you doing here? And I looked up and I said, Craig Miller. And he said, Terri Hardin, what are you doing here? And I said, I'm waiting for the movie. And the guy won't let me sit down. And I'm determined to see this film, so I don't care what he makes me do. I'm going to see it. I deserve the first ticket. I saw it the most times. Blah, blah, blah. And he says, sit down. And I said, no, he's going to arrest me. He told me he's going to arrest me. Craig said, trust me, sit down. So he sat me down. And for those of you who have never been to the Egyptian theater, and you never will be in the Egyptian theater in 1977 because they've remodeled it, but it used to have a huge overhang that stretched for easily about 20, 25 feet to the front door. You walked under this. In fact, it was a great space for premieres of films, because for films like later Alien, we were able to walk through Mother. We were able to see the jockey, which was displayed there. We were able to see an actual alien that was displayed there at the Egyptian theater because of the way this theater was laid out, so you could do these giant motion picture displays. It was fantastic. So I'm sitting there and I peek around the corner and I'm looking down this long gangway, and at the inside the door is Craig Miller arguing with the manager, and they are really in a huge argument. And finally, Craig Miller makes the "that's final" scene by crossing his arms in front of his body and sweeping them out. That's it. I'm not talking to you anymore. We're done. Signal. And he storms, and the manager just kind of slumped his shoulders as if to say, all right, I'm defeated. And out comes Craig Miller. And Craig Miller turned to me and he said, you are guaranteed to get the first ticket. You are guaranteed to be first in line. You are guaranteed not to be harassed anymore. You are guaranteed to be left alone. And if for any reason you are not left alone, you are harassed in any way, you are to call me immediately. And he gave me his business card. He said, because if you are harassed in any way, we will pull the film. And the doors opened up of this van, and out came Empire Strikes Back film reels in the big, giant cases.
Yeah.
And I went, what? You know, he said, trust me, Terry, George Lucas doesn't want his fans harassed. And if you're harassed, we've got several theaters that are more than happy to open their doors and say, take this film. So the Egyptian Theater has agreed you are not to be bothered anymore.
Wow.
And he drove us, they roll the film in, disappear behind the doors. I fall back exhausted, and I have my eyes closed, and all of a sudden you just have this sense, and I open it, and across Hollywood Boulevard was a little delicatessen. And now this little dude is dodging the traffic with a tray. He's like, and he runs up to me with a tray, and it's got a submarine sandwich, some chips, and a warm drink, and he say, you fight a good fight. You're very good, but you don't eat. Eat. And he shoves the tray, and I go, oh, thank you. And he goes, well done. And then he runs away, and there was a meal for me. So you never know who's watching you when you're doing something. And remember, if you did this today, you would probably be carried away in a paddy wagon because you're nuts. But back then, they had never seen such passion and obsession. And I never thought about around me. All I saw was that ticket, kind of a Charlie and the Chocolate Factory moment where I wanted that first ticket. And so I finally curl up and start to close my eyes. It's about 9:30 at night, and the first new fans are coming to line up to stay the final day. And by the next day, you could see the end of the line across the theater. It had gone all the way around the building, and you could see the end of the line from the front of the line. And at 6:30 in the morning, I got a microphone shoved in my face, and the person said, are you the first? I was half asleep. I said, yes, I want the first ticket. I've seen it 181 times. I deserve the first ticket. And the person went, what? And I woke up, and they woke up, and then nonstop interviews all the way. Channel 7, Channel 5, ABC, NBC, radio stations across the place. And they said, what? I collect one sheets, I said. LA Times came out, and they just did a book we were discussing at breakfast called A Galaxy All Their Own. Look it up. It was 2015. And I'm not only among the people on the cover, I'm the biggest picture in the lower left corner. And then I have a full 2.5-page spread on the inside that tells this very story because the LA Times wanted to know. And in the LA Times article, they talk about when I finally get to, the rope is dropped and I'm allowed to walk to get my ticket. You walked the short 10, 15 feet to the ticket booth. You paid your money and you got your little stub, which I still have today. And I walked the long trek down towards the front door of the Egyptian Theater. I was very tired. And then I walked down the aisle and I sat third row, third seat, which is my favorite. And the Times makes it sound like as I walked, then I walked back up to go to the bathroom once my friends had around me. And they said that everybody was going, Terry, 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 as I walked up the aisle in the Egyptian Theater. It wasn't like that. It was more like, Terry, oh, hi, how you doing? Terry, what's up? What's up? Terry. It was more like that. But the Times makes it sound like the last scene in Rollerball,
Everyone was shouting your name
Jonathan. No, it was just a person going, Terry,
go Terry,
yeah,
Terry.
Exactly.
High-fiving you as you walk up the aisle.
Exactly. And they just wanted to know that they had supported me, they'd seen me on TV. And then the manager of the Egyptian Theater met me and said, "I'm terribly sorry. I didn't realize. I didn't understand." And when I came back to see the movie, they had reupholstered my seat with a rope across it, and I could go and see Empire anytime I wanted to.
Oh,
they just would let me in, and I saw it just under 100 times, around 96 times. Just because I have to tell you, I love Empire is my favorite movie ever done. In the Star Wars sagas. I just think it's really amazing. And I not only did I go because I go, but I thought this guy has gone through all this trouble. How, I've got to go and sit in this chair every so often because he's worked really hard. This is a hell of an apology, And as a result, my collection exploded because I was only collecting one-sheets or movie posters, and people from all over the world started sending me movie posters because they had heard me on radio, TV, and all of that.
So explain about the big poster.
So now tons and tons of things are coming into my house. And I'm only collecting one-sheets because I don't have enough room to collect everything that's Star Wars. Back then, they did toys, they did model kits, they did action figures, and all of it pertained to recreating the experience for yourself. And so I realized that I could keep some of the toys and I could keep some of the... I kept the books, I still have the books, but the main thing that I said I can collect and continue to collect is the one-sheets or the movie posters. So I have Japan everywhere. So for those of you who are Star Wars fans and avid Star Wars fans, you'll know the name Steven Sansweet, who was the archivist and still is, I believe, for Lucasfilm. He also has the largest Star Wars collection in the universe, at least back in, I guess, right after Jedi came out. I sold my collection in 2007. So I think he appraised it in the late 90s. And he came to my home to appraise it. And when he was there, I asked him if he had his checkbook because I had something I thought he would want. And he kept telling me, "I have the biggest collection. You don't have anything you can sell me." And I kept saying, "Did you bring your checkbook?" And so, long story short, he looked through my collection, which was extensive. Weird stuff was LA Times ran a comic for, I guess, 3 to 7 years. I don't know how long it is, but I had every comic, every single one, in envelopes that ran from during that duration the Chimes ran it. I have those. I sold them, but I had them. And then I had records that I would buy, vinyl, as you call them today. I would buy that had the Star Wars theme, played by everything from the harmonica to the accordion to the penny whistle to the pipe organ. Anytime that someone decided to play the Star Wars theme using an unusual instrument, I would buy that record. And I think I had about 20, and that sold as well. And so he was looking at this weird collection, and he goes, "Man, your collection is more extensive and in better condition than mine." And I said, "Well, then, Steven, buy mine and sell yours." And he was like, No, I'm not going to do that. So finally it came to this poster, and I said, "Would you like to see what I have for you that you're going to want?" And he crossed his arms and he sat back in my chair and he said, kind of like, "Bring it on." And so I went to my room and I pulled out this big, huge folded poster. Now, you could obviously tell it was a poster, but it was color side in. It was white on the back. And it because it was folded, it was beginning to fray on the corners, which was one of the reasons I really wanted to move it because I didn't want it to be destroyed. And I handed Steven Sansweet a small letter-sized piece of paper. And as he took it from my hands, he noticed that the letterhead said Lucasfilm, the classic Lucasfilm letterhead. And then the letter said, "Dear Terri, I saw you on television and realized that you are a really avid collector of one-sheets. And so in your hands, you hold a very, very rare one-sheet that I thought you should be the owner of." 2 weeks before, let me tell you a story. 2 weeks before Empire was released, George Lucas came down to me and said, "Burn every poster, that is going to be a billboard on Star Wars. I've changed my mind. I'm going to do a different Empire Strikes Back poster. So the original poster was going to be the Gone with the Wind poster, which many of you may remember was a watercolor poster with C-3PO and R2-D2 facing forward, but above was Han Solo kissing Leia and then Luke kind of looking, Star Wars-y next to him. But it was purples and blues, very watercolor, very beautiful artwork. And Lucas had them all destroyed. And in his place, he did a white billboard with black lettering and Darth Vader's head in a star field in one corner of it. That was the new poster. So this man then continued to write in the letter, you now hold one of the two posters. I burned every poster as instructed, but I kept one, and now you hold the only other one. And Stephen Sansweet began to shake. And I want you, the listener, to imagine the ultimate thing if you were to find it. You're in a thrift store or you see a person and the thing you've always wanted but thought you'd never be able to have in your home or in your hand suddenly appears in your hands. Because for Stephen, what happened was he began to breathe funny and a trickle of sweat came down his brow. And he whispered, I thought it was a myth. And I said, excuse me? And he said, a myth. I thought it was a myth. So now I know that in Lucasfilm there was the story of two posters or one poster that might have missed the fires. And he just didn't believe the story. He thought it was something they were water coolering around, So I opened one panel and showed it to him. And I said, how much is it worth? And he said, it's priceless. So then I asked him how much would he pay, and he finally was able to stutter out $7,000. And I said, sold. And he said, how could you possibly sell me this poster for $7,000 when I've told you it's priceless? And I told him it was because he was the biggest collector of Star Wars stuff in the universe. And that just to put my name in the corner and saying where he got it, but that he could have it for that. And he wrote the check and said his wife was going to kill him. But just like I said, I mean, next time somebody says, do you have your checkbook? Then maybe you better put it in the car because you will be buying something. So now full circle, Star Wars was the reason that I am now, I did Captain EO. I was in Ghostbusters. I did Men in Black. I'm a Henson puppeteer. I'm a Disney Imagineer. All of this came because I saw this movie, and this movie showed me that my hobby was not a hobby as an artist, that my hobby could be a career. There it was. And I later met a lot of these people who were responsible for making this film, this first little film, come to life, including Harrison Ford and George Lucas. But more importantly, I met other artists like Lane Liska and John Dykstra and people like this who were able to tell me about the experience and give me advice on how to then break through in the film industry. And shortly after that, I broke through with Dune.
Wow.
And it all just opened up.
That's fascinating. So what do you think to the new movies?
Well, I love the new movie. I was so scared. I have to tell you that I absolutely hated the first Star Wars movie that Disney came out with. What one was that called? I don't know. But the one that traced over the original film. So if you weren't born in 1977 or you hadn't seen the Star Wars Episode 4, you thought this was a good movie, even though they traced it. And it was really offensive to me. I got really angry. They just literally, there was an artist back in the day called Ralph Bakshi, and he would just film people and then trace them with them and make animation. And I used to think, it's such a cop-out, it's such a cheat. And now Disney had all the opportunity to do a spectacular film, bring it back. We hadn't seen a Star Wars film in so many years, and they trace. That's what I felt like. Except, let's replace Luke with a woman. Let's replace one of the characters with a black guy. Let's replace. It just was so offensive. The cantina scene, a little different, but a Millennium Falcon bigger, and this one has a monster. But they even hide in the floorboards just like they do in the original film. So I was really not happy with that first film. And really passionately angry about it, as many are passionately angry about this one. But for me, I did not watch social media. I did not listen to what people had to say. I barely watched trailers because I wanted to have that fresh look into this new Star Wars of 2017. And the thing that really breaks my heart is that social media seems to be a bunch of people that can't keep their mouth shut and let people see it for the first time. It was only out for, 4 days? And the internet was full of people either talking about what they hated, talking about specifically. So they're spoiling it, and it's not even a week out. And I thought, this is so self-centered and selfish that you get to see it and then you're not sharing it. You're not allowing other people who want to see it fresh. They have to stay off. So the first thing I did was tell everybody, don't look at your social media until you've seen it. Because otherwise you're going to get it all spoiled for you and you don't know how you would have reacted had it been fresh. And I was very fortunate to stay away from it long enough. And I was invited to an Academy screening on the 15th when it was released. And there was a Q&A, and I got to meet Mark Hamill. I had not met Mark Hamill.
Oh, wow.
Met Mark Hamill, met the director, met the costumer, just met the whole behind-the-scenes group of people, the sound guys, the editor. It was just sensational. It was a very beautiful experience. And the director said, you have to see it 3 times because I've put a lot of stuff in it. And do I think everything about it was perfect? No. But I do like the direction it's going. I do like the feel that it had. There were a few costume choices I thought were weird. There were a few spiritual choices I thought were kind of silly. But bottom line is, I think overall it's a really great film, and I love that there is practical mixed with computer generated in this one. So if you're someone who loves computer, which I think makes everything look fake, you've got to have some practical to give you grounding. This film does a lot of practical. So they have a lot of practical models that were built, a lot of things that were integrated with it, very much like the Imagineers do. And I really do like that was brought to that film. So I'm excited to see it 2 more times.
Just 2?
Just 2 more times. Check it out. And then I'll probably own it. So it's one that I want to own for behind the scenes. So
are you going to watch it 100 times?
I don't know, because nowadays, guys, don't we have it differently? Everything is science fiction. Everything is a comic book. Everything is it changed. What you guys may or may not understand because maybe you weren't born then. And I'm not saying like, in my day. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that Star Wars revolutionized the way we looked at films. It changed fashion. It changed TV commercials. It changed television. It changed every way that we looked at anything can be taken back to Star Wars. It opened the doors for films that were being made like Close Encounters and Aliens, who could have easily been the breakout film, but Star Wars was before, and it just paved the way for those 2 films. And what filmmakers do is they go, oh, well, those movies are great. Let's piggyback on those and we'll have a hit as well. So it's just been fantastic. So let's look at the Academy films that could be Academy Award winning this year. Unfortunately, Star Wars will most likely not get nominated because the Academy doesn't usually do that. But there's a wonderful film called The Shape of Water by Guillermo del Toro. It's fantastic. And I really, really hope it gets nominated because it's just a beautiful, beautiful movie that could not have ever been made had it not been something like Star Wars breaking through. So that's why I celebrate the movie. And if you are not a Star Wars fan, you're a fan of Disney or fan of something else, a football fan, a sports fan, understand your passions are the same. It's just for different objects. So you'll be able to understand why we are so passionate about what we're passionate about, because you're passionate about what you're passionate about. So if you're someone who loves the Minnesota Vikings and you're wearing a Minnesota Viking jacket, which I don't get, because I don't do sports, yet I can understand it because I would wear a Star Wars jacket in a heartbeat. Yeah. Right? Or a lit up Small World jacket for Disney others would wear. It's the same. It's just different. What you love is different.
Absolutely. Right, well, I think I will wrap that up there. Thank you ever so much, Terri, for
You're welcome.
having a chat with me.
We should make a book because there's a lot more to it, but I don't want you guys to be falling asleep. I could be 2001 if we're not careful.